just a few minutes, there are cars that are lined up on the road, and they can't turn in. And so here's what I'm going to ask you to do. You've already pretty well done it, but if there are any spaces empty in the middle, would you scooch, would you fill those up so that the latecomers can just find a seat much more easily? Now I know in a group this size, we probably have realtors and some commercial realtors. Let's be thinking, does anybody know a bigger room? We didn't know what to expect, and so we wanted to start out with just a nice cozy group, and we're going to get cozier and cozier as time goes along. I think there are a few more chairs we can put in the room, but be thinking if anybody's got any suggestions. This is going to be a group where we just resource one another. That's what we do. This isn't, the leadership knows everything and everybody else follows along. This is the opposite of that. The leadership knows nothing, and you guys have to contribute all the knowledge aside from just the biblical knowledge. I'll fill that in for us. So let's wait just a few more minutes. Since this isn't a church, I'll explain this to you later. We don't need to start right on time. There's no clock. There's no ticking down. So just a few more minutes. We won't start too late, but I realize this is Wednesday night and people are coming from work, and so I want to give them every break we can give them, okay? So just a few more minutes, and then we'll get. All right, let's call this meeting to order. Man, this is exciting. You can say, I was there for the first one. You are the founders. This is the founders group right here. If this were an organization, you'd be charter members, but it's not an organization. It's just a bunch of people, which I'm going to get into in just a moment. I know just from eyesight, many of you are from Northland, and I love that. As time goes on, yeah, thank you. It was, by the way, if you were at the services this weekend, it was so much fun for Becky and I told Becky, this is like going to your own memorial service only you don't have to die. It was just awesome. And so, but as time goes on, I think we'll have more Northland people, but we will grow way faster with non-Northland people. And so that's what we want to be. We want to be a community group. And let me just start out here. This is not a church. I'm going to say that to you every week. This is not a church. It's not even a 501c3 organization. It's just a group of people that gather together because they want to love and live like Jesus. I mean, it's just that simple. So we're not going to talk about doctrines. Do you pass the test? We're not going to talk about labels. There are no labels in this room. They're just people in this room. Very interesting people with very valuable stories that God can use because he's led us all in these wonderful paths. And so every person is uniquely valuable to how God wants to love and serve this community. So as you learn about each other, that's great, but there's no labels. Christian, not even a label we're going to use. Again, just people who, do you know that most of the other religions, matter of fact, I don't know any other religions, at least mainline, that don't respect Jesus. In Islam, he's a prophet. In Judaism, he was a rabbi, one of them. And so Jesus is our center point. And I'm going to be, as I go through the Gospel of Luke, I'm not going to bring out the issues of doctrine. You go to a church for those, and you need a church. I mean, churches are great spiritual communities. This is going to be a community of servants, and that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be very practically talking about how is the world different because of what we believe and who we follow. That's the key. How is the world different because of what we believe? So this isn't we're not going to be doing a lot of religious knowledge here. When you, I'm going to be, I'll get easier with you as time goes along. I'm careful right now just starting out. But I'll loosen up as time goes along and say anything I want because I can't get fired anymore, you know? It's awesome. It's awesome. But I think a lot of institutional religion does a lot for the name and not so much for the actual life that we're supposed to live. I was going down the street, this is years ago, and I saw a car with a little fish on it, little ichthus, symbolizing I'm a Christian. And then I looked up and I saw on the dashboard, this is several years ago, a radar detector. And I'm thinking, now here's a person who's not quite so into obedience as she is into avoidance. And that's what I see with a lot of institutional religion. I mean, it's I want the label, but I'm not sure I want the obedience that comes along with it. I'm not sure I want the hassle. I'm not sure I want the submission that comes along with it. And so when we focus on Jesus, we just focus on someone we want to become more like. And we want to love like he loved and live like he lives through us. And so this is not a download of religious information. This is going to be a little bit different Bible study than you've ever been in. I'll give you a lot of religious information just simply because I've studied the Word for almost 50 years, and it just will pop out when I'm talking. But, hey, I just thought of something. Thank you for watching is this on Facebook? Facebook, and later it's going to be on YouTube. Thank you. We love you, and there's way more of you than there is of us. And so bless you for doing this. We really appreciate that. Those of you who can't make it on a Wednesday night, know that these will be archived, and you can just get they'll be immediately archived, and you can access the lesson that night and the discussion. I'm more excited about the discussion than I am about the lesson. You know, it takes me not too long to get really tired of hearing myself talk. But when somebody else is entering into the conversation, I get super excited because I'm really curious as to what people are thinking. I'm curious as to how it's coming across. When we don't have this, we used to have this in the church, and then for various reasons we didn't. Another story. But you never know if you're really connecting unless the other person says something. And so I don't want to, be up here giving you a bunch of information without you saying something, and us really connecting together. And so the download is not of religious information. The download is of application. How do I walk this out in my life as it is right now? That's it. See, we've got so much strength in this room. I mean, it's just so. But unless you can put it to use, I told a story a long time ago. I'll tell you a lot of my old stories because that's what old men do. They tell old stories. But how many of you remember Merv Griffin on his? Yes. Okay. All right. Merv Griffin had this interview show, and this is way back when the bodybuilding first came into vogue. Bodybuilding never used to. You remember who played Superman? Steve Reeves? No. Christopher Reeves. Okay. No, I mean way back. Way back. George Reeves. Was it George Reeves? Okay. Yeah. Do you remember him in tights? The guy had no muscles. I mean, he was just like tubular, and you go, huh, Well, later on, muscles came into vogue, and so Merv Griffin had this bodybuilder on his program, and he brought him in, and he introduced him, and the guy comes out in a little, get up here, and then he just started posing, big muscles, and then he came over and sat down, and Merv Griffin looked at him and said, man, that's really phenomenal. Let me ask you a question. What are all those muscles for? And the guy just looked at him. And he got up and he started posing again. And he sat down and Merv Griffin said, no, seriously, what are all those muscles for? I would ask us the same question. Why do we have the gifts that we do? Why do we have the knowledge that we do? Why do we have the strength that we do? What are all those muscles for? They're not just to build on themselves to show off. They need to be there for some practical application. So, here's what I'm going to say to you. I want you to bring to these something that you can write on. iPhones are fine if you're good with your thumbs. The younger you are, the faster your thumbs are. But with many of us, it's like it's not an effective method of note taking, and so pen and paper might be better. And I'm going to give you information like this, all right, that I expect us to take action on. And sometimes I'll say, who can do that? And sometimes I'll say, come up afterwards to Dawn. Where are you? Where are you in the room? Okay, here's Dawn. This one you would come up to either Dawn or Angie. Angie in the back. See Angie in the back there? Okay. We have a family. Part of this group is to address homelessness in Central Florida that has reached crisis proportions, but it's about to reach catastrophic proportions because there aren't enough living units right now to house all of the homeless. There are 100 chronically homeless people, and chronic homelessness is by definition, you either have a physical or a mental disability that you can't work. There are 100 people who have been through the system that we have no house for right now. And so we're going to have to search for that housing. Now watch. There are, I'm trying to think, 15,000 school children in our school systems that are homeless right now. We know they're homeless right now. And we can't build fast enough to house our way out of this. Now watch. What do you think just happened when Irma came through? People were displaced from their homes. Now watch. What do you think is going to happen now that Maria has visited Puerto Rico? 100,000 of our brothers and sisters are going to come over here, and they're going to be looking for housing. So homelessness is huge. The government, as many of you know, I'm the chairman of the Central Florida Commission on Homelessness. That ties together all of Central Florida's governments, all the mayors, all the commissioners, all of the major corporations like Disney and Magic and Florida Hospital and so on and so forth, all the provider agencies like Salvation Army and Rescue Outreach Mission and so on and so forth. All of them work together. But you know what? They're all tapped out. They're doing about as much as they can do right now, and we're facing a decrease in federal funding. Do you know who they're looking to for some sort of practical solution? The faith community. Because we're the ones who care. We're the ones who have untapped and uninventoried resources, both in terms of, you know what? Yeah, we're going to have that. Those of you online, there's a regular train that runs through here. You know, pretty soon we won't even think about it, but you're going to be going, is that a train? Yeah, it's right there. But we have untapped resources, which is what Community Resource Network is here to do. It is to discover, inventory, and then employ those resources. Some of you say, I got a big old house, and I could take a boarder, you know, for a few months, or you know, or I need a renter, you know. If you will vet them, I'd be glad to have a renter in my house, because these people are coming, and the cheapest apartments they can get are like $1,100 or $1,200 a month. Nobody can pay those. And so what I'm about to say here, this is just one of the very practical things we're going to be doing. Yeah, I'm going to get to Luke just a second, but this is just one of the situations you're going to hear about every week, because we are a practical group that is going to take action to change the life of Central Florida. So this is just one of those families. And if you know anyone who can give them temporary housing, we'd like to hear it. Go up to Dawn afterwards. Dawn, raise your hand again. Stand up. Stand up. That's Dawn. She is the CEO of Community Resource Network, or Angie in the back. Go up to her. Here's the situation. There's a family with a husband and a wife, 3 little girls, and a baby on the way. They just got priced out of their apartment. Now, these are both hard workers. He has a college degree in computer science. Is it computer science? I'm going to have you coach me through this. Computer science. He just left. He just got moved out of his temporary position. She is finishing law school. She will graduate in a few months, take the bar. And so in 2018, early in 2018, they'll be able to support themselves. But they're at a place right now where the apartment building they were living in, the time lapsed on the agreement that they had to be a rent-controlled apartment, and their rent went from $900 to $1,300. They couldn't do it. And so now they're living at the birthing center, which isn't a bad place if you're going to have a baby, but they're living at the birthing center, and they're going to food banks for food. And these are Dawn's visited these folks. They're the sweetest little. She said, if I had a big old house, I'd take them in a heartbeat. We've got one extra room. We'd take them in, but you know that'd be stacked. You know, so if you know someone, and they could kind of do the delayed rents deal. Is that right? Because they will have some money coming in. He's taking a job at Publix right now just to get some food money. But both of these folks are eminently employable, hard workers. They invest in their kids, and we're working on finding the husband better employment so that he can make the adjustment until his wife gets the law degree. So anyhow, that's just one example. If you know somebody or some space that could house these folks temporarily, we would love that. And we'll come back next week or the week after with a story. We did something, okay? That's what this group is about. Practical stories, not about theory. It's about, we did this, all right? Let me give you another example. This is on the other end of the spectrum. That'll only take a few hours of your time. We need to inventory, we need to count the youth of this community that are homeless. And we need to know who they are and where they are. And so I need to have better information than I've got. Where is it? Okay. So we're going to be doing a count on October 10th. October the 17th to the 19th. If you could give a few hours and go to the Orlando area, you'll be trained. You'll be given an area, and you go out and you just ask these youth their information. And many of these kids are LGBTQ kids that got kicked out. Many of them are kids that aged out of the foster system, and now they've got no place to go. Many of them are just, their parents were not functional, and so they're on their own, and they've been on their own for a while. But we need to, in order to help them, we need to know who they are. So we need people who will say, I can do that for a few hours. I'll be glad to go out and make the count. And so if you would do that, here's who you email. You ready for this? This is Catherine, Katherine, at Impact Homelessness, all one word, impacthomelessness.org. And if you didn't get that, or you say, okay, now you tell me, I don't have a pen on me, we will ask you for your information. If you want to give it to us, no pressure. When we take the break for questions and answers, we've got some people who come up and give you a website that you can go into. And if you want to stay connected and want these practical ways that you can really help out, especially for the vulnerable of our community, just go to that website, give us your name, and we'll keep you abreast of these opportunities. Okay, so let me reiterate. This is not a church. Did I tell you that? I just need to keep saying that. I know that, for a long time, you've seen me as a pastor of a local church. Those days are fulfilled, and now I'm just, a servant who loves poor people. I was talking I'm sorry to drop names. I won't do this often. But President Obama called me Monday just to razz me about retiring. And I said, I need your advice. First of all, you've been through a huge transition. I want to know how you managed it and what you're doing now, to rebalance your life. And he said, well, other than trying to win back the affections of my wife for the last 10 years of what I put her through, and dropping off my daughter at college, and I cried the entire time. Other than that, he's also going to be training kids for success. He's building a foundation. But I said, here's where I need your. You went from a community organizer to the president. I'm going from a pastor to a community organizer. So I need some hints here. So anyhow, I tell you that to say, this is not a church. Did I tell you that? This is not a church. You need a church, but this is not a church. This is a group of people who will serve and live like Jesus and love like Jesus. This is By the way, God loves that. Do you know, again, this story, I haven't told this one in years, but it's one of my favorite stories. It's about this preacher, this really renowned, preacher that dies and goes to heaven. There's all kinds of stories about people who die and go to heaven. And goes to the gates, and St. Peter's there. And so St. Peter says, well, who are you? And he says, kind of proudly, I am the Reverend Dr. So-and-so of such and such church. Had a huge, prestigious church. Peter looked at him and said, never heard of you. And he was so taken, he was so hurt. He said, you don't understand. He said, my congregation grew from just a few hundred to thousands and thousands, and people were in my congregation that were community influences. I mean governors and legislatures, and it's such an impactful church. And St. Peter looked at him and said, well, it's odd that I never heard of you, but I never heard of you. And he said, he just so rocked back. He said, no, you don't understand. People changed their lives because they went to that church. And we had people in that church that, and he just went on and on about all the accomplishments of a church. We had 1,000 programs and all that kind of stuff. And he said, nope, sorry, I got nothing. And the guy just slumped over and hung his head. And St. Peter saw the top of his head. He said, wait a minute. Are you that guy that would go to Central Park every day and feed the sparrows? And the preacher looked up and said, yeah. St. Peter said, come on in. The Lord of the Sparrows wants to thank you. That's who we are, okay? That's who we are. So, and we're not, again, it'll get better after this. We're not a lecture group. We're a group that has mutual insight and fellowship. Now we've got to be out of here by what time? We got to be out of here by what time do they? 9. Got to be here by 9. Got to be out of here by 9. So you can't linger too much. It doesn't mean you can't go to restaurants together and stuff like that. But we got to. But the point is that we will get more from the discussion than we will from the lecture. Believe me, because we will learn from each other. And when we all pool our stuff, I don't care how, some people for years, because they've been trained in institutional religion, they think, well, there are some people who know a lot and I don't know anything, and so they're valuable and therefore I'm not. That's not how this works. That's not how the body, the fellowship works. Years ago, I heard a story of Bob Benson. He was one of the greatest storytellers. And it was a true story when he was a little kid. And he went to a Nazarene church alone, simply because Nathan, you probably remember the name Bob Benson. Did you ever hear him? Did you ever hear him talk? Did you? Man, I've heard him on tape, but I wish I'd have met him. But he used to tell when he was a little kid, and he went to church alone, and so one morning he went to church, and they had announced this, but he forgot about it because he was a little kid. And they said, we're going to have a church picnic this afternoon. Everybody bring food. We're just going to have a pitch in and a church picnic. And so he's sitting there. He's thinking, man, I got nothing. So he ran home after church, and he looked in the refrigerator, and there's this old dried up piece of bologna. Remember how bologna, if you leave it in there long enough, just kind of starts to curl, And he went to the cupboard, and there's these two old, crusty, pieces of white bread, and there's just enough mustard to get your knuckles yellow, digging for it with a knife like we used to have to do. And so he spread that and said, well, this is good enough for me. I'll just take this, and I'll at least have something to eat while everybody's eating, and I'll be a part of the church, and so on and so forth. So he takes it, and he's coming. And he sits down at the table, at the Johnson table. Now the Johnson table, this may have been your table, your ancestors. The Johnson table This woman cooked all week for this. I mean, it was fried chicken and baked beans with bacon and, onions floating to the top and maple syrup and big chunks of potato salad and these bundt cakes that were a mile high and it was just, I mean, you could smell this table from 2 miles off. I mean, it's just, you would just want to go and just, so he just sits down at the table and he unwraps this bologna sandwich. And he'd cut it up into 4 pieces, trying to make it look more, so nobody feels sorry for him. Mrs. Johnson looked over at that sandwich. She said, "Is that bologna?" And he said, "Yeah." She said, "You don't say. It doesn't have mustard on it, does it?" He said, "Well, yeah, it does." "That's a bologna and mustard sandwich?" She said, "That is my very favorite food in the entire world." She said, "I'm almost afraid to ask you this, but would you just put that with all the rest of this food so that we could share? I could have a little bit of the sandwich, and then you could eat whatever else is here, and we could all share it together." That's how this works. This is Acts 2 right here. All right? That's how this works. So don't ever feel like you don't know enough to ask a question, or there's something that is going to make you sound foolish. It's not. It's not. The way it works is we're all in this together. So, and then lastly, and I'll do this in just a little bit. This group will be a funding source. I warned you that we would take up an offering. All right. Now this group does not receive any funds. Don't write a check to a community conversation, because we're not a 501c3. We're not any kind of, we can't receive it. Don't do that. But we're going to be a funder for 2 organizations that are very valuable, both of them dealing with people who have been virtually left out. All right? One have been left out physically and socially. That's the homeless and the marginalized and the people that just haven't been included, or at least not lately, into society. The other is for the people who have been left out spiritually. They just never fit in the established church. They gave it a shot, or maybe they were hurt, or maybe they didn't feel worthy to watch, but they just didn't fit. And so we want to multiply churches that are formed around relationships that already are, so that everybody's included, especially those that weren't included in the regular deal. We'll talk more about that later on, but that's part of the usefulness of this group. All right, now we're getting here, all right? And then soon I'll ask questions. We're going to study Luke together. This is a major change for those of you who have been following me. We're going to study it out of the NIV Bible. Now, for those of you who have followed me for years, we have always done the NASB because it was the best for parsing the original language into modern-day English. The NIV Bible is the best for understanding in an inclusive way, without having to translate, it didn't mean actually just him, it meant everybody. It doesn't mean just men, it means like everybody, and so on and so forth. And so even though it's true, some of the older versions we stumble. We just kind of get caught up stumbling on the details that we shouldn't stumble on at all. So this is the NIV version. Why are we studying Luke? Several reasons. First of all, Luke has, of all of the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, those are the four Gospels that tell the story of Jesus. Luke has the most complete history of the life of Jesus. And if we're going to follow and imitate Jesus, we want the most complete record of his life. And Luke has that. The second reason is this. Luke was written for non-traditionally religious people. Non-traditionally religious people. Luke was a Gentile. He's the only Gentile writer in the New Testament. In other words, he was a non-Jew, all right? Luke was a doctor. Luke just, somebody once said that ministers see people on their best behavior, lawyers see people on their worst behavior, but doctors see people like they are. And so Luke was a doctor. It says in Colossians chapter 4, verse 14, it says, "Our dear friend Luke, the doctor, and Demas send greetings." So Luke was a physician, and just kind of tries to lay out things as they are without trying to find deep spiritual meaning or trying to explain deep spiritual meaning. He just tells the story. He tells the story that anybody can hear, anybody can understand. Also, the Gospel of Luke has a tilt to it. Every Gospel has a different tilt. And therefore, every Gospel has a different symbol. The symbol of Matthew is a lion. That is, the Lion of Judah. Matthew was the most Jewish-oriented gospel in existence. In Matthew, he always said, "This was done to fulfill," and then he would quote the Old Testament. And so Matthew was written for the Jews. Mark has as its symbol that of a man. Mark is the shortest, straightforward, just unedited. Mark has more uncomplimentary passages about the disciples than any of the Gospels. Like Jesus looking at his disciples says, "How long have I to be with you?" And you can just hear the word idiots in there somewhere. And so Jesus really gets outwardly frustrated with the disciples. And so Mark's symbol is that of a man. John's symbol is that of an eagle. John, the Gospel of John, has this running commentary through it. So he kind of tries to explain everything on a philosophical, theological basis. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And he was in the beginning with God, and through him all things were made, and without him nothing was made that was made, and in him was the light, and the light was the life of men, and so on and so forth. And so you get this huge picture. And it's very theological, and it's very philosophical, and it's very high-minded. Here's the key. The Gospel of Luke, the symbol is a calf. A calf that was used for sacrifice. The Gospel of Luke is about how we sacrifice our lives in order to be of service to others. In the old Moravian church, I don't know how many of you maybe have a Moravian background. Their symbol was there was an ox with, see if I can remember right, with an altar and a spray of the harvest, and the line underneath said, "Ready for either." I can either be sacrificed on an altar, or I can work to bring forth a crop. Your call, ready for either. And so this is the essence of the Gospel of Luke, and so that's another reason that we're studying this. The third reason we're studying this is that, or fourth, or wherever we are right now, I can't even remember right now, but it is, Luke was brilliant. This is, if you could read Greek, this is the most exquisite Greek in the New Testament. Luke spent time with Paul in prison. Now everybody knows Paul, who wrote a huge portion of the New Testament, was a brilliant theologian. He was a Pharisee. very proud of his studies, of his degree, of his pedigree. And as Luke spent time with him in that prison, let me see if I've got, it's somewhere in here. Wait a minute. Yeah. No. Well, it's somewhere. I'll catch up with you later on. I've got a record of that somewhere. But if a reference for that somewhere. But as Luke spent time with him in that prison, he learned from Paul. Luke, brilliant in himself, in itself, but he was a Gentile, so he didn't have all the background of Judaism. So Luke could be informed of the theology that bridged the Hebrew Scriptures with the experience of the New Testament. And when Luke says, I myself, this is in the first chapter of Luke, verse 3, I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning. He wanted to know, as a doctor, you want to know that this is factual, that this is evidence-based. It's not just philosophical, it's not just a story. And so he went and he interviewed and got a multitude of witnesses so that he knew what he was writing down here was evidence-based. Luke translates the gospel into that which everybody can have in common. Luke dates the events of the spiritual unfolding of the manifestation of the Messiah with Roman dates, with Roman figures. And so therefore, he's not just talking to religious people. He's talking with the population in general that can say, I know that date. And in the time of Herod the king of Judah and Augustus Caesar issued a decree and so on and so forth. And so therefore, he has Roman dating, not Jewish dating. I still remember the time a friend of mine. She's a friend, but she's a Messianic Jew, and she stood up in Northland and she said, and meaning very well, you know that God goes by the Jewish calendar, right? And I thought, well, I hear her heart. I hear her heart. But God goes by whatever calendar we're looking at. It's not about a religion. It's about whatever calendar we're going through, whatever experiences we're going through together, whatever calendar we're using together. That's how God goes. And another thing Luke does is he translates Jewish names into English phrases or plain phrases. For example, he said Golgotha, but he just didn't know the word Golgotha, which translated means the place of the skull. So therefore, he wanted to make sure that all of us understood what the words meant. Jews automatically knew what it meant, but a Gentile wouldn't. And so he's very careful to educate in general. And then there's a special attention and respect Luke shows to women. That frankly, the other gospel writers and it was just not part of the culture back then. Now, Jesus was a pioneer when it came to respecting people that nobody else respected. But when it says, for example, in Luke chapter 8, verses 2 and 3, it says, wait a minute, there it is. It says, Luke 8, 2 and 3, and some, first of all, he talks about the 12 that were with him, and then he says, and also some women who had been cured of evil spirits and diseases, Mary, called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had come out, Joanna, the wife of Chuza, the manager of Herod's household, Susanna, and many others. These women were helping to support them out of their own means. So you see, he's picturing strong women that are of aid to Jesus. that have their own place in the gospel, their own contribution in the gospel, and they don't have to look to men in order to accomplish that portion of the gospel. Luke also is very careful to break down all barriers when he's writing. He breaks down racial barriers. It says in Luke chapter 9, verses 51 through 56. I won't read the whole passage, but he said, and he sent messengers ahead who went on to a Samaritan village to get things ready for him. Now, this is a racial, it's subtle for those of us that come in the West, between a Samaritan and a Jew, but it wasn't subtle for them. They had been separate long enough that it was a racial barrier. But the people there did not welcome him because he was heading for Jerusalem. Now, those of you who do know Scripture, you know that in the passage about the woman at the well, she says, "Well, where should we? You people say we ought. You Jews say we ought to worship in Jerusalem. We Samaritans say we should worship on the mountain." And so when they knew that they were going to Jerusalem, they said, "Oh man, these are Jews. We got to stop them." Now watch. It says, when the disciples and James saw this, they asked, "Lord, do you want us to call down fire from heaven to destroy them?" Now, get this. You know, this is a 2017 reaction to a difference. This is the culture we're living in right now. You know, they don't agree with us. Don't you want us to destroy them? Look at what Jesus said. But Jesus turned and rebuked them, and they went on to another village. In other words, Jesus said, "What are you doing? Why would we do it? Let's just go someplace else. Why would we even go there?" So there's a racial barrier that's bridged there, not by further confrontation, but by just saying, that's not a real barrier. This is not a real barrier. You got a barrier built up in your minds, but this isn't a real barrier. He also breaks down the religious barrier. It says in Luke chapter 7, verse 9, it says, the thing about the centurion. Centurions weren't Jewish. You know, they were Roman soldiers. Who knows if they even had a belief. But they were, this one was a good man. And he did have faith. Nobody knows what kind of faith it was. It was just faith. And so Jesus said, "Well, I'll come and I'll heal your servant." And the guy said, "Remember this?" He said, "You don't need to come. Don't come under my roof, because that would taint you in the eyes of the crowd. That would contaminate you with religious people. And I don't want to do that to you." And he said, "I'm a commander. And I know a little bit about commanding." He said, "You're a commander of the spiritual world. You can just command the angels, and my servant will be healed." And listen to what Jesus said. Jesus said, "I tell you," he's talking to Jews, "I tell you, I have not found such great faith even in Israel." In other words, y'all call yourself Jewish? You haven't got faith like this. And so he broke down religious barriers, saying, I don't care how religious you are. If you don't, or how religious you act, if you don't have actual faith in what God can do, then that's not really a dividing point for you, the way you think it is. He broke down economic barriers. I don't need to. That's the one where his parents took him to be dedicated, because that was and the dedication of a poor child, of a family that didn't have any money, was 2 pigeons. And that's what they did, because they were a very poor family. And then the last one I have written down here is that he broke down social and cultural barriers. Luke 7, 36 to 39. Where are we here? Oh yeah. This is the one about the sinful woman. He's having supper. I love this passage. He's having supper at a Pharisee's house. And the courtyards were such that anybody could come in. It wasn't a door that you had to pass through, you know. The courtyards were such that anybody could come in. Well, a sinner gets in there, you know. A woman of the evening gets in there. At least that's the legend. That's the saying. And she is so taken with the fact that she could even get near him. She begins to weep and wash his feet, drying his feet with her hair. Remember this passage? You know? And this Pharisee gets all up, you know? And he says if he knew what kind of woman this was, you know, this is a cultural thing. This is not just a religious thing. This is a cultural thing. If he knew what kind of woman this was, this is a social barrier. We don't hang around with these kinds of people. And Jesus just went on to say to him, you know, she loves me because she's been forgiven much. You know, I came into this house. It was only right. It was only customary. It was only hospitable that you would wash my feet. You didn't do it. But here she is doing what she's supposed to do. And so all of that to say that Luke is the gospel that I want to start us with, because it opens us up so that we have the most togetherness, the most respect, expecting to see each other with personal dignity and ready to bestow that dignity on everyone that comes in our path, just like Jesus did. All right. We're just going to do the first 4 verses tonight, and then we'll in subsequent weeks we'll go into the rest of the gospel. Luke chapter 1, verse 1. Many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us, just as they were handed down to us by those from whom by those who from the first were eyewitnesses and servants of the word. Therefore, since I myself, now this again, this is the only gospel writer starts talking about I. He uses the pronoun I. Only it's not I as the center of the story. It's I am personally involved in the story. There are 2 ways you can use the word I. Number 1, you keep hearing yourself the word I because it's all about you. It's about your reaction. It's about you. This is about how this affects you. How important it is to you. But the other one is, it's not about me. It's that I am personally involved. I'm committed. I'm responsible. That's what he was saying. I'm responsible here. And so therefore, I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning. I'm responsible. It seemed also to me to write. It seemed good also to me to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus. Now I want you to see this. The word Theophilus means friend of God. Theo is the Greek word for God. Philos is the Greek word for love. Philadelphia is a city of brotherly love. And so philos is the kind of love that is just a brotherly love. And so this is a Greek name. It's a Greek word. And so it's a Greek writing to another Greek. But he uses the adjective or the title most excellent, which is a likely title if you are a government official. So the chances are that he was writing somebody who was very prominent, who was probably or could have been a government official. Pretty cool, huh? Okay. So that you may know the certainty of the things you have been taught. So I want you to see that Luke is all about wanting somebody to be confident in their faith. And that's what this group is going to be about. I don't want you to be sure about your doctrine. I want you to be confident in your faith. Those are two different things. You know, one is about the head knowledge, I know more than you do. The other is, you know, if I have faith, I can do anything because God's going to be in it. And God's going to make it come out better than if I hadn't done anything at all. Because I'm personally responsible here. And that's what I want us all to think about and to act on. Okay? All right, that's your first lesson. Now, comments, questions, let's get some discussion going. I love this part of it. Oh, I'm sorry. Do we have roving microphones? We have roving microphone. Mimi is going to be one rover. Who's the other rover? Rover. There's only one rover? Man, Rover, you're gonna be running. Okay. Who wants to be the first brave one to ask a question or make a comment? Come on, just take. Okay, good. There's some over here. There's one back there. One back. Okay. Speak into the microphone. There you go.
My name is Judy. The family that needs the housing, what area of Orlando do they need it in? Because I work for a property management company, and we have about 700 homes.
Oh, bless you.
But they're all over, like from
Okay.
DeLand to Mount Dora to... What area do they need? Okay, I'll see you.
Okay, thank you. All right. And in case that doesn't work out, other people need to see her too. Okay, this won't be the last family we need to help with. This is so cool because when people walk into these agencies that are supposed to be the main housing agencies of our community, they don't know what to do. There was a mother with 3 children, or 2 children, I'm sorry, walked into the headquarters of the Central Florida Commission on Homelessness and said, I'm going to be on the street tomorrow. They had no idea what to do with her because the systems don't work and these people don't qualify. And so what do? They call us up and we find the housing. So it's pretty cool because they're all kind of seeing that we are the practical help that the community needs. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
My name is Allison, and my question deals with the homeless population that is mentally ill and what your goal is to help with that, because that's an issue we brush under the rug in our society currently. Absolutely.
We do have special care and special capabilities to help those folks. First of all, with the mentally ill, they're like everybody else. If they have some form of stability, we have all stats that give evidence to this. So this isn't a theory. If you can put them in a home, then they can get better because their lives will become more stable. They will begin taking their meds. We never put anybody in a home that we don't give. We don't have support services with, including the case manager. I'm totally distractible.
Hi, this is a question for Dawn as well. I was wondering if you had the resources to accept donations like food, or do you have a pantry? And can you talk a little bit about that, or about what donations you might need?
Give her Dawn, speak into the microphone, will you?
So in terms of being able to accept tangible goods, what we're doing as part of the network is creating relationships with providers that we will then share who those providers are so that donations can go to those providers, so that when we do have a family that we're helping with, we can actually go back to those providers and then they'll give us that help as part of our program. So as we, our new website has just launched today, and over the next few weeks we will be building information into the website as to who those providers are, so which food pantries we are partnering with, as well as which areas that collect household goods and other items that we would encourage people to use, because they are people who are supporting our program, and likewise will then support the families that we work with.
Let me give you the philosophy of the Community Resource Network. It's the exact same philosophy of the distributed church. No surprises here. The philosophy is you don't have one center that people have to come to, because transportation is very often the problem, and we have a lot of providers. Nor is there one big church that has more resources. The philosophy is that as you engage all the providing agencies and all the churches, and even, not every homeless person is Christian. Some of them are Jews, some of them are Muslims, so we want to go to wherever folks are walking in saying, I need help. And we want to create this network that any member of that network can access all of the resources on that network, whether they be material or there will be some people who say, hey, I'm a plumber. I'd be glad to give 3 hours a week pro bono. I'm an attorney. I'm a handyman. I can somebody's car breaks down. I'm a mechanic, or I can drive them to work or whatever. We want for the little storefront, fire come down from the Holy Spirit congregation of 25 to have the same access to the resources as Central Florida that a Northland or a First Baptist or First Presbyterian or any of those churches have. And so that's the idea of this thing, that the help would come closest to the need because, it's a very simple reason, not just because it's a transportation problem, but because it's a relationship challenge. You see, we want people to walk in because they need resources, but discover they have a relationship and somebody who cares for them. Because we can very easily, let me just say this. Many of you are old enough to remember Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker was the management guru, Peggy Crosby down here. Sorry. I go back to the old. But Phil Crosby was also this management guru. But he said that the trouble with the corporations of America, and this extends into other areas as well, is that they spend 80% of their time and resources solving problems instead of developing potential. Now, when it comes to the homeless, that's where we've been. We just want to solve their problem, But these are people with great potential. And why don't we look at them as somebody to be developed, into this terrific part of the community, and that takes a relationship. That takes getting to know someone. That takes actually loving them and walking along with them for a little while. Now, there will be a few people who just say, I just need my car fixed. Okay, that's all right. I'm glad to do it. But for a lot of these people, especially people who are caught in the cycle of working, going from food bank to all of this kind of stuff, this is key. This will solve it. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you for all the information you gave us earlier. I've been praying for a while for the Lord to give me a heart like Jesus and to see things like he sees them, because from my perspective, I think the world is a pretty confusing place right now. And the thing that you said tonight that breaks my heart the most, and really has been for a while, is that there are 15,000 children in our schools that are homeless, and I want to understand that a little bit more. Like, are they homeless with their parents? Are they homeless separate from their parents? And as a society and a culture, how do we impact that? And also, how are we allowing that to happen? It's very disappointing to hear.
Thank you. Well, that's a really good question, and it's a little bit technical, but let me just not go way into the weeds, but a little bit into the weeds. When the government counts homelessness, they count people who are literally without a roof over their head, you know, and when schools count homelessness, they don't do it with the same way. They count, yes, there are children that are living out of a van. There are children who, are living in the woods with their parents or just don't have any kind of, they're living in places that weren't built for human habitation. But there are also children in these flea trap, rat-infested hotels that charge so much for families and the kids got to come out and they got to walk through sex traffickers and drug dealers, and there's a meth lab next door, and that's who the school counts as being homeless. It's not just having a roof over your head. It's not having a stable environment where you can feel safe and you can reach your full potential. And so therefore, we need to find creative solutions. I see Ryan and Jamie Smith back here. These guys are awesome, and I won't sing it because it would embarrass him, and he's a lot bigger than I am. But he wasn't when I first knew him. He was about that big. But they own trailer parks all throughout the United States. And part of the creative solution that people really haven't thought about yet, and this, of course, is a big, it's glossing over all the details. But these people who are living in these hotels, at least 50 to 70% of their income is spent just keeping a roof over their head. And so they're trapped there forever because they don't want their kids to be exposed to the elements, and so they're trapped there forever. If they had a manufactured home to go to, the math works out something like this. And they just had and we're going to be building up. That's where your offering goes. We're going to be building up a gap fund to help people get into these homes. But if they had just a gap fund to put a down payment on one of these homes, the homes would be essentially a half of what you would be paying in a hotel or one of these, really bad apartments. And in 10 years, you own your own home. So it's a way better solution. And during that 10 years, the family actually has money to spend on food and clothing and so on and so forth. We can do this. If we put our minds to it, we can work way outside the efficiency of government. Now, I'm not trying to put government down because they are a key part of what is needed, especially for the chronic. But they haven't got a clue what to do with families. And that's where we can really help. So did that answer your question, or at least part of it? Okay, thank you.
Joel, this is Rubinelle, one of your members.
Yeah.
What you have said really have touched home with me because it sounds so much like a village, and it sounds so much like bartering. And I wanted to know about the children. I taught school for 30 years. Do they have places for children for the care of a child when the parents are trying to work? What happens with that?
A lot of times they don't. A lot of times these kids are on their own. There are some schools that have aftercare programs, but those only go so far. Many of these parents are caught in these jobs that are minimum wage and take you hours. The hours are way beyond where the school could cover the kids. And so a lot of them don't. But again, this is one of these things that with some creative solutions, we can help solve. And so I'm hoping that's part of what develops out of this group. Who else? There's some down here and back here and over yonder and whoop.
Sorry about that. Hello, good evening. I just wanted to share a couple of things with you. So it sounds very similar to what Reverend Faith Fowler is doing in Detroit. But her focus was on tiny houses, and
Yeah.
we're talking like, the $7,000, $1 square foot rent type of housing. empowering those who are building up that community to learn life skills, to become independent, and basically as they're paying off that home, they become the owner, and therefore they can use that house and sell it. If it's, I believe the worth is then like $40,000, they can use that as a down payment to move on into a larger home. So I think it's a great idea, and I just wanted to share that with you. I also wanted to let you know that, homelessness is something that I think we all encounter on a regular basis as we're driving down the street, the children in the schools. And one of the things that, I've been battling is similar to what you're saying is, where do you get to the root of this? And we have a small group that kind of initiated a little project, but it's the foster kids. They're aging out of the system, and they end up in that homelessness. So we're trying to empower them, started a training program to become food handlers, get them certified, get them employed, so that they can then be self-sufficient, allow them that time that they need to grow and develop. And so we're working with our community partners to make that happen. So I'm glad to be a part of this conversation.
Thank you. What's the name of your group?
It's very new. It just started on Monday, was the first group session.
Awesome. I love that.
First training session.
I love that.
But the goal is over a 6-week period, we get them certified as food handlers. That would be, that's recognized in the food industry, and therefore we'll help them with the resumes, get them employed, and hopefully continue to do that. And we're believing, we really have the faith that we believe this model, if it works, if it's successful, we can do this in other places.
I love that.
It's just the start of something.
Good for you. Good for you. That's exactly what we need. We need entrepreneurial thinking, all right? There are lots of different kinds of housing, but, for some reason, the government is only thinking in terms of, we got to build more apartments. Well, you can't build fast enough, and the more apartments we build, the more poor people are being priced out of the apartments. And so that's really not the answers. We need entrepreneurial thinking, not only for housing capacity, but also for job capacity and the support services that come with relationships that really know these people. That's the key. You have to know. I've said many times, Tolstoy in Anna Karenina starts out his novel with, every happy family is alike, but every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. And so you can't just have this blanket solution that's going to work for everybody. You've got to actually know people and have the network that you can have a personal empowerment solution for that family. Okay, who else?
Hi, Pastor Joel. My name is Yvonne. And I have to say that as part of me is excited to see the group, a part of me is also finds it a bittersweet. And let me explain. So you keep saying that this is not a church, but yet we're doing something that I feel like the church should be doing. And my question to you is, has the church failed to do just this, and then we kind of have to give up on our churches taking over, making a difference in the community? I'm sorry, it's kind of very personal to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely right.
And or should we? Or do you have any tips for people for when we go back to our churches to mobilize our personal churches into doing something like this, or should we just refer here?
Yeah, boy, that's a great question. And the question is, this group will empower the church to do what it can. Having said that, the structure of the Western church, the institutional church, is not mainly based for the people who don't come there. It's mainly based for the people who do come there. And so we want to empower the church to do what it can do. But it takes a group of entrepreneurial followers of Jesus to go create something that the church hasn't done since, listen to this, since the 1st and 2nd century. The church in the 1st and 2nd century grew because it went out and took care of people that nobody else was taking care of. When there was an epidemic, every well-to-do person ran for the hills so that they wouldn't be infected, except the church. And the church stuck around, and they took care of people no matter who they were. And so people said, man, I want to be a part of that. Unfortunately, the Western version of the institutional church has done more to cater to those of its own members who provide the resource or the revenue for that church than it has time to go out into the community and just spend itself. So we don't give up on the church because the church can still do so much. The program that you have is a wonderful program at Northland. And so the churches are doing a lot of good stuff, but the churches will not come close to making a dent to the epidemic of homelessness in this community. So we've got to have something beside it, something in addition to it. Yes, I'm sorry.
Hi, my name's Karen, and yesterday I was listening to Friends Talking Faith. I think it was yesterday or the day before, and I heard you speaking, and I'm not a churchgoer, but what you said really moved me. And I said that I want to be excited about what I do every day. And I've worked for government for 15 years, and I've worked in housing and transportation and urban planning. And
Get her name.
And not a lot of stuff gets done. It's like the slow boat to China sometimes. But I feel like what you're doing is so vital because up north, like at the turn of the 20th century, they used to have settlement houses in a lot of places where poor people lived. And I feel like your function of what you're talking about is just like the settlement houses, and it's so needed because you need like a central place where people can get resources and told what to do because there is no place. I mean, I had cancer like a year and a half ago, and there was no social worker at the hospital unless you were admitted to the hospital. I said, that is the craziest thing I've ever heard. Yeah. So, I'm so excited about what you're doing.
Thank you. It's really what we need. The communities, it takes a village. The communities used to act together because they knew each other. And they wouldn't permit human suffering. Their religious convictions would not, their moral compunctions would not allow them to watch someone suffer without them helping. We have broken, there's a professor at Harvard, Robert Putnam, who has written a book called Bolding Alone, and it says we have broken that social contract. This group is meant to put that contract back together because we'll never solve this. We will never solve this just by individual entities, no matter whether they're government or provider agencies or churches or anything else. We've got to work together. Go ahead.
Hi. My name is Raquel. So if we out in the community come across a family or an individual that needs help, where do we send them?
Glad you asked. We've got cards, we're right now. I'm making. First of all, let me say this. Hundreds of you have volunteered. We hope that you will make sure we have your information. It's going to take a while to get an army of coordinated volunteers, but we will do that. In the meantime, we will react to people's particular situation as well as we can. We will refer them to the resources that are available, and we will come to you for the resources that are not yet available. But we will help. And so are there cards that people can take tonight? Okay. Okay, grab a card. Okay, if you run into somebody like that, give them the card. Say, I want you to contact these people, and we will respond. Okay? All right.
Hi, my name is Joanne. There's a lot of drug addiction out there. That could be a problem for these families, too. Will there be a venue to help these people get clean and start a new life?
Absolutely. Again, here's the deal. That was brought up in a venue. There's study after study that says as long as somebody is homeless, that drug addiction cycle will continue. You put them in a home, you put them in a stable housing situation, and you've got a great running chance for them to kick those drugs. Because again, you've got the care, you've got a sense of stability, they now have hope, and they have somebody around that will kind of help them through. No guarantee, because all of us knows the nature of addiction. But the best chance for them to get clean is to get a roof over their head. Hey, Cheryl.
Hey, Joel. I have a question. I work with a lot of schools, and I really believe that homelessness and poverty is definitely a problem. And I think one of the ways out of it is education. And so I see us on this side of the problem addressing the homelessness and the poverty. But I'm wondering if we could entertain the thought of maybe we could start on this end with the children and start investing in some of that education that hopefully will keep them from getting to this part.
Sure, absolutely we can. Absolutely. Okay, which is totally predictable the first night. I was going to explain how to give us your information and how to and where the donations went, so let me do that right now. Okay. First of all, where's our little banner? Annabelle and Bailey, come up here and hold so that you can just see plainly, where you can give us your information if you want to be a part of this very practical. Can you guys come up on stage? Come on up here. Excellent. Okay, so write this down or type it into your browser or whatever. Here it is. info@acommunityconversation.com. info@acommunityconversation.com. If you will go to that website, if you will email, and do what?
Send an email to that address and put your name on it, period. And we will keep in touch with you and figure out what's
My wife says, if you will email this address and just put your name on it, we will get in touch with you, period. Okay? All right, that's all you have to do. We're all about simple, all right? Does everybody got this now? Okay, you guys can sit down. Now, I want to tell you about Slingshot. Chad, where are you? Come up here. I told you that we are about the people who are being left out. There are people who are being left out of community, spiritual community, because they're not church people. And that's totally understandable. They've had a rough experience or they just don't want to go there. They're just not joiners, Here's a guy who I think is the master of the future. And his... and we need a microphone up here. And especially for people of his generation, they've got no loyalty to the institutional church. It's like, yeah, well, all right. So how does the church multiply? How do you multiply caring, compassionate, Jesus-centered communities that will serve other people? Chad, it's to you.
All right. Well, that's the idea. I think for all of us, we all, when Pastor Joel says we want to be a community of servants, we all go, yes. None of us walk in and go, you know what? My aspirational goal is to be selfish. I want to be focused on me. I'm going to have a good, quiet time, and that's going to be the end of my faith journey, and one day I'll get to heaven and call it a day. This is a group of people that is like, no, actually, I got this one life, and I want it to matter for good. And I want to use this life in a way that's going to be a way that expands my faith beyond just me. That's all of us. That's why when we start talking about homelessness, we're all like, Yeah, absolutely. And here's the cool thing, is that God has put that sense in all of us. You are all called. Each of us is called by God to participate with Him in building His kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. That means His kingdom in your neighborhood as it is in heaven. That's His kingdom in your workplace as it is in heaven. That's His kingdom in your school as it is in heaven. We all have this calling. And the amazing thing, the extraordinary thing is God has gifted you specifically to participate in that calling. He's called you and He's gifted you. And yet often if we stop and go, but how's our everyday experience? We go, well, there's kind of a gap. You know, I feel that, and I think most of us feel that too. We go, there's kind of a gap between this sense of being called to something bigger than myself and this sense of being gifted for that and wanting to put that into practice, but then kind of everyday experience. And we live in a culture that is so focused on the self. We live in, we operate in institutional paradigms that kind of are focused on the institution itself, and sometimes those folks that don't fit in the culture and they don't fit in the church, they kind of get lost. And we get a little lost knowing how to serve them. And I know all of you guys look at your neighbors and you look at the people that you work with or that you go to school with and you think, I want to reach them. I want to engage them. How do I do that? Slingshot exists for that purpose. It exists to help you, to come alongside you and send you out in your context, with your calling and with your gifting, so that you'll know how to begin to engage forming a grassroots community of faith and love right in your context. Because, by the way, God has put you in that context for a reason, for a purpose. And so without getting into how we do that in 1,000 different ways. But we have built an ecosystem and are building an ecosystem that can come around you. It's fully, I grew up in the distributed church. You know, that's what Mandy and I talked about. Like, we grew up hearing this, and we're like, okay, let's do it. You know, let's live it out. And that's what we're all about. And so Slingshot exists to help you form a faith community in your context, serving the people of your neighborhood, of your workplace, or the people that, frankly, you feel called to serve. And that could be a unique community. And so if you're interested in figuring out, yeah, but how do I do that? Like, how do I take that step? I don't know how to do that. That sounds awesome. Well, that's why we saw that there was a gap. And we said, well, we'll focus on that. We'll help you do that. And so Slingshot exists for that purpose. You can read about it. We've got cards over there. Or I already loaned out one of my cute daughters to stand up here and give you info at. But if you email info at, we can follow up with you as well as a part of that. So I think I got it.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Any questions? Slingshot. Explain where the term comes, slingshot.
Frankly, it came from the way that God called me into this calling. I was wrestling with my own calling of, should I be a senior pastor of a mega church? Should that be the path that I should follow? And those of you that know there was some context for wrestling with that. And God came to me in a very profound way. Man, I get emotional about that. I've been surprised by every emotion I've ever felt in my entire life. And I am again. God came to me in a very specific moment, in a powerful way, with a vision, and said, don't put on Saul's armor. I'm sending you out with a slingshot. And so I said, okay, well, we're going to go out with a slingshot. Doesn't feel like the best way to go always. Seems like there's better ones. But in faith, we'll do that. But the idea is to help you accomplish your calling and sort of to slingshot you. So you're sort of the smooth stones in the paradigm here, to send you out to go fight giants out there in the community. So that's the idea.
Let me tell you how you can help. These white boxes around are the offering boxes for Slingshot. Slingshot is a micro church incubator. It shows people how to form a church in the relationships they already have, and therefore multiply the churches, especially for people who don't fit into the normal or the institutional church or the established church, or however you want to put it. There's also a website that just went live today or yesterday, I can't remember which, called what? Slingshotincubator.com. If you want to go there and donate online, you can do it. What you're basically doing is you're multiplying the spiritual communities for people who will not be involved in regular churches. And that's extremely important when it comes to people being sustained with the kind of support and encouragement and spiritual growth that they need. Then the other blue offering box is the Community Resource Network. We've been talking about that all night, but we want to be able to create these gap funds to get people just exactly what they need in order to get back on their feet, and to get to know them personally, so that we're not trying to just throw money at the problem. We're actually helping. And so that's what Community Resource Network will be doing. Dawn, what else do we... Yeah, Dawn's holding up... Oh, I'm sorry. I got them all mixed up. Well, I put my... What did I put over here? Okay, hey, you better check the box, because I think I put my check in... I put my Slingshot check in the Community Resource thing and my Community Resource check in the Slingshot thing. So check it out. Okay, and if and this one time only, just for the founders group. If you want now, you know what? I'm not going to do that. Let me just, now that I brought it up, I'm sorry. Becky and I just personally have paid, between $4,000 and $5,000. Never mind. Don't. Never mind. Slingshot, Community Resource Network. We're good. Okay. What? No. No. Oh yeah, checks. You can write checks to either one of these. I'm sorry? Oh, a community conversation can't get a check. Thank you. A community conversation can't get a check. Only Community Resource Network and Slingshot can get checks, okay? And then both of them have places on the websites that you can go on and donate by credit card, or you can text. We'll have a text number for you. What am I forgetting, Don? Anything? Okay. Hey, this has been a great first time. Bless your heart. This started something huge. Huge. We're going to try and quit by 8:30 every week, so that you can have just a little bit of time before you get out to fellowship, and then we all need to be out of here by 9 o'clock, okay? All right, thank you. See ya.
Oh